So we'd like to shake things up a little bit with this panel. We've talked a lot today about exciting technology and innovation, and it really leads you to ask yourself, what does it all mean to the human? So it's hard to argue automation and the value that it brings is compelling. But are we talking about eliminating humans from the process, or are we talking about enabling humans? And that's what we want to talk about today. My name is Ed Chanda. I lead KPMG's insurance practice here in the US, and I will be your moderator. And I'm joined by Yamini Bhat, who is the co-founder and CEO of Vymo, which is using technology to enable better sales and monitoring of sales. And so she's in a perfect position to talk about what a digitally enabled human might be capable of doing. And we also have Matthew Mosher. Matthew is a COO of AM Best. And while he is using technology to improve the things that AM Best does for themselves, it is his exposure to the industry broadly and his discussions that we have with clients, insurance clients around the country, that brings him a really broad perspective on what's going on, what's important to our insurance clients, and what are they thinking about. So with that, why don't we get underway? And Matt, I want to start with you on the first question. So after all of this innovation is said and done, will there be anything left for us to do?
Well, I think there's several aspects to that. One, all being said and done is a long way away. There's still a lot going on, and in an insurance industry, particularly the property casualty industry, where risks continue to evolve, and you see more and more risks, limited data. You need to look at the assumptions off the data, so you always have to have some idea of looking at that risk and just continuing to look broader at what's coming down the pike that's there. The other aspect is, when you look at innovation and continuing innovation and the ability to have innovation going forward, innovation, there's not an end to it. But innovation is based on culture. And last I checked, you need people to really develop a strong culture to continue to look at new things and what's going on. AI's doing a lot of wonderful things, but I don't think we're going to get to the point of AI developing culture anytime soon. And finally, the other aspect too is the insurance industry remains a relationship aspect still. It's going to evolve. You know it's going to evolve, but I would still say we're a long way off to the point of saying, you know what, relationship doesn't matter, trust doesn't matter. You're still going to look for who can you trust and who is the person that you feel like you want to do business with. Is it going to be a machine every single time? Is it going to be, I just want to push a button on my cell phone and get that coverage and that's all I need? Again, a long way from that point. I think a lot of companies spend a lot of time to make sure that they're providing that level of service beyond just the efficiency that's there, but that level of service that makes you want to come back and deal with that organization.
So you guys at AM Best have thought enough about innovation and how important it is to the success of companies, or I would even say survival of companies, to actually incorporate it into your rating process. So if you could maybe talk about that a little bit, and the way that works.
Sure. We started looking at it several years ago. It's an important aspect to this industry when you look at the challenges that the insurance industry has. One of the things is expense ratio and efficiency, and removing some of the barriers that are there to doing business. And that efficiency comes through innovation, through different ways of providing service. It also looks at how does a company take just ideas in terms of generating new policies, new coverages, new business processes, new procedures for how they're doing things. And that's going to be an important part for how they are developing their business going forward. Sorry about that. That's going to be an important part for how they develop business going forward, is the fact that they can evolve their business and continue to provide service to their customer The more and more efficient process, the less expensive process. If you can squeeze expense out of the process, that's where customers are going to look at cost and how they can get a cheaper coverage. How can they get it more efficiently? Those are the things where innovation and Insuretech are going to play a big role in the next 5-10 years to evolve and look at that. So when we look at financial strength, we look at it from the perspective of, we have balance sheet strength. That's the capital you have today. Your earnings are kind of the capital of tomorrow. And we look at business profile. And that's where we look at innovation as being a critical piece to what companies are doing with innovation. How do they service their customer? Why does the customer come back to them? What's the ease of doing business that they have? Do you have a policy that is better suited for what they're looking for? Those are the things that are going to protect your long-term financial strength. And if you're not looking at it today, somebody else is. And I don't care if you're State Farm today, if you're not looking at innovation, somebody else is going to be bigger and better than you down the road because you're not going to be innovating, you're not going to be solving your clients' problems and issues and dealing with their risk. And that's what we're looking for those companies. We're looking at how do they deal with innovation and build that into their process. So the more they're looking at that, the better they're going to be off down the road. That's going to play a role in their financial strength analysis when we look at it.
So historically, the industry hadn't had a great track record of changing very quickly, and I know you're probably still, making the rounds. But do you get a general sense that the industry is moving?
Absolutely. We did a survey over the summer that looked at innovation and what companies are looking at and how they are viewing innovation, the importance of innovation. And when you look at it, we have a report that we've put out that takes a look at what's the driving issues for companies in innovation, what are they trying to do, what are they trying to solve, what are the challenges they have, and where can they go with innovation. And when we look at it, we had a very high response rate. There's a lot of companies looking at these issues. Right now, there's some that are just starting to say, what is this? What do I have to do? But there's others that are a long way down the road and have kind of figured out these are the key issues to drive innovation in my organization.
So, Yamini, why don't we talk about what digital enablement means? Can you give us an example of what a digitally enabled human is?
Yeah, so let me share where my experience with working with people actually comes from at our clients, right? We serve Vymo as a personal sales assistant. It's used by about 75,000 salespeople across 60 different enterprises, of which I think 50% are insurance companies. Insurance is very heavily human-led sale, and the clients that we have had across the board I've only seen them grow their sales teams, which is agency-driven sales teams, by at least 20 to almost 70% year on year, right, depending on the market they're playing in. So this is not a space where there is, of course, a meaningful amount of digital sales that's happening, but the core high-ticket, high-value, high involvement products are still sold on the basis of trust, and the human angle there doesn't disappear. What we've seen happen, though, is that these agents today spend about 70% of their time, sales agents or relationship managers, spend about 70% of their time on very mundane stuff. Simple things, right? At the end of, say, one of your customers is coming up for renewal about in 30 days from now. Keeping even track of that pipeline if you have a big enough book, and then trying to do the right checkpoint way in advance, not 10 days, not the day of renewal or 10 days after renewal. Even that is a process, and that is not something that you should be doing even manually. A simple tool can actually help you solve such a scenario, right? Simple tools could help you solve things like, hey, I've finished this call with this, say I called a customer and that was a missed call, right? At the end of it, the natural human action after that is to send a message saying, hey, I tried to call me back when you have a minute, here is what I wanted to discuss. You don't have to do that as a human, actually. A system can do that for you, right? So there are very simple things, and those are the easiest examples, right? The more complicated examples where they have to go through hoops to get the data is, my customer has had an issue with a service request, and you have not responded. How do I get to know what the status of that is? Right? And you have to ping a multiple set of people to get an answer to that. So a digitally enabled agent is someone who, say, I want to prospect more, I'm running out of pipeline, I want to make $10,000, and that means 10 deals, and I'm only closing 4. Someone please tell me that you are only going to close 4, not the other 6, based on what we observed, and here are, say, you're sourcing through financial advisors. Here are 100 advisors within 20 miles of your house that you could go and start cold calling and building a relationship with, right? Just help you enrich your pipeline when that is needed, help you do the follow-ups on actions, simple actions on calls, meetings, renewal reminders, right? And also not just remind you about activity, but be a true assistant to you. And technology could actually tell you that, hey, you're finishing this meeting tomorrow at 5 p.m. Here are 5 of your customers who require attention within a mile of that location. Why don't you go and catch up with them and see if they're available right now? So they should help you do a lot more of the one thing that makes business for you, which is actually being face-to-face with your customers and trying to earn that trust and make that sale, not the 70 to 90% of stuff that takes your time, which is just mundane process work.
I could use something like that just to get me through my day.
Yeah.
One of the things that we face here in the U.S. is a sort of an aging agent population, right? The average age of an agent is about 50, or more than 50. Do you see, that this might solve some of that challenge?
It should. Let me give you an example. It's probably a crude comparison, but like, what was the typical age or profile of a taxi driver 3 years ago? You can imagine that, right? How would the cab look like? What do these drivers look like? And how do you actually get a cab, right? The whole experience. And if you wanted to book something in advance, oh my God, can you remember those days? And what does the average age of a taxi driver look like today? Your Uber person, right? And they're actually people that you can have a conversation with during the drive itself. Right? And these are probably people who might have been in similar educational or even work backgrounds as some of us, and they're doing this just as a side gig, right? How did that whole industry get transformed? It got transformed because technology helped remove the 90% on. You don't have to go and find customers. I don't have to go and seek and plan who will drive me from A to B day after tomorrow, right? Technology just tried to bring everything together, and the whole industry changed in terms of what the average profile of a driver looks like. Technology should do the same thing even in this particular scenario. It should be able to bring a much, much younger workforce. All of you talk about how to address the YOLO segment, the millennial segment, you live only once, right? And the fundamental belief is, which is a good belief, is that to get to that segment, we need to sell socially. Great. But that's still only 5 to 10% of your sale. The fundamental principle of selling insurance has been that influencer network and trust is what is required to make that sale happen. That's how agency started, right? So how many of your agents are actually YOLOs and millennials? They aren't. Why would they be? Because, hey, they're Facebooking and they're Instagramming, and suddenly they open your solution or the technology that you've given them. Probably you've not given them anything yet, right? And they are transported 3 decades backward into this whole desktop-based system that they have to actually try to understand. So it's not about 50-year-olds trying to understand something like Temple Run. Every 50-year-old I know plays Candy Crush and Temple Runs and Farmville, right? Right? It's about 20-year-olds trying to understand those systems, right? That's probably way more challenging because you don't have the patience to go back and learn technology which should be dead by now and fossilized, right? So ultimately the goal is, if that's your market, that has to be your seller network also, and you get that seller network only by creating technology that they can use. It has to look like Instagram and Facebook making a sale, right? And dealing with an insurance company, it cannot look like what it is today. Yeah.
So you mentioned some of the things that the Vymo software can do. One of the things you described to me earlier, which I found extremely interesting, was this idea that if you have a new agent and the software can detect that they need help in a particular area and keep them on track. And is this the training profile of the future?
Yeah. So one of the things that we did with this, so attrition is a massively painful topic, right, for any insurance agent, insurance company, or a broker. We were in the situation where this company had massive growth targets and hired 40% more agency network in one of their countries, and took up 25% higher sales target from their CEOs, and then beginning of the financial year, lost about 30% of their existing network. So you're back to practically where you started from, right? But the some of the leaders in that company were saying that, hey, it's good loss because those were the non-performers, and we could see that in the recent performance reports. So Vymo tried to understand what was really happening. We had over 2 years of data for this particular sales team. We went back and tried to analyze the behavior of the people who had left this org, the ones who had you had an attrition of, right? And we realized 70% of those agents were ones who had, so we built a quadrant on skill and will, who were the actual, on activity and outcome. Who were the ones who were doing a lot of activity and what was their outcome? And when we built the matrix, we saw 70% of the people who had left the org now, in their first 6 months, were falling in the high activity, low outcome bucket. So they were actually doing a lot of calls, meetings, and we could detect that. You don't have to enter that manually in Vymo. We could detect that. So they were doing a lot of activity, but they were not seeing outcomes, and there was nothing done which was a one-on-one coaching intervention saying, hey, you've done 3 meetings, 0 conversion. I will tag along the next 2 meetings with you, right? It was more of, every Friday, 3rd Friday of the month, we run this session about this product. Please come back and sit in our classroom and learn what this product is about, right? So technology can help you solve that. It can actually help you understand who needs what kind of an intervention, and that can massively drive up your productivity and even solve problems like retention.
Great, great. All right, so Matt, I was going to come back to you with a question, and then we got a question from the audience here, and I think they dovetail nicely. The question from the audience here is, any thoughts on reskilling or training existing workforce at insurers?
Well, I think what we've seen, and I think kind of falls in line with what Yamini was saying, is a lot of the technology really is reinforcing and making people more efficient at what they do. So it's not wholesale retraining and taking somebody from doing job A and now you're going to do job D. It's kind of migrating down the road and enhancing what they do. Right. So it's training on new skills and around new systems and new processes and how they can do their job more efficiently. We do see a lot of new skills coming into the industry in terms of data analytics and the ability to work with programming right online as opposed to the old-fashioned, here's my IT department, they're going to develop my systems and they're going to roll them out. It's more developed online and working through things. So we're seeing a lot of skills come through like that. But most of the training and reskilling, to quote the question, is really around, here's the new systems that we have. How do you work more efficiently in the process of developing the business or processing the business or providing new coverages that are out there for a company?
Right, right.
I actually have a point of, like, my 4-year-old son did not require any training to break into my iPhone and start playing Subway Surfer. So I actually have started believing that people should not require training to the extent possible. Like, people who are devising technology for today or for the next 10 years should design it in such a way that there's only one way to do things. How many of you need to be trained on how to use the Uber app, right? So, or how to order food on one of these. So it should be straightforward. The beauty of technology and AI, for that matter, is to hide the complexity and give you one best way to take this forward. And yes, there's a small button which gives you an alternate option, but one best way in which this can be taken forward. So one of my clients during our, so Vymo gives suggestions to the salesperson and you can dismiss them. The client said, hey, can I swipe left to I think dismiss and right to accept, and I look who's been spending too much time on Tinder, but I'm very but I'm very proud that he actually made the leap and said, I want this to be as easy as that, and that's how people should think.
Right. So we've done a number of surveys at KPMG about this exact topic, and we suspect that there is a shortage of financial services people and insurance people in particular with the skills necessary to understand the business that we have. And so I agree with your statement. It's not as hard to make the shift as maybe people think, but as people have been involved in the process of gathering the information which needs to be analyzed and make the shift to solely analyzing it, they need to be prepared mentally for that change. And if we let them go, it's tempting to restructure the process and let people go and save the costs, but you're not going to be able to get them back. So you really need to communicate with those people and hang on to them as much as possible and have them see the vision that you just articulated. That is why I was so fascinated by this idea that the software can help you make the transition too, because I think the learning of the past, which is I come to KPMG, I spend 30 years at KPMG, and I know what I know. That's not going to be the learning path anymore, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of things that I did in my career which we're not going to do anymore.
Yeah.
And so all that learning experience goes away, and it needs to be replaced with a different kind of learning. And
Yeah, I think the bar becomes easier for users of technology. It should get simpler and simpler. But for people who are building that technology, it becomes a more and more complex job because you have to give simplicity in the front end. There is massive amount of complexity in the back end.
Wait, I would add, I think that's the challenge of bringing in people as part of the organization or partnering with organizations that can then develop that software so it is easier to use. There's still, it's an aging population in the insurance industry. So to the point of, do you just move those people out, or do you develop the apps and develop this process and systems that make it easier for them to do what they need to do and continue to be more efficient? But the talent pool in terms of the skill set for developing those apps is something that the insurance industry has never really been strong in attracting that type of talent. I think a conference like this is a great chance for the insurance industry to go find talent like that. When you start to have the discussions and you start talking to some of these people that have a lot of the skill sets and are working on this, they find and learn more information about the insurance industry. You may find that they feel they fit into the culture of the organization you have, and you bring that talent in that way.
So we talked about the companies, Matt, that you talk to as part of your service, and how they feel about innovation. Do you feel like they get this the human component, or do you think that still needs to be driven home?
It varies. It really does. I mean, we got a range of responses. To one response being, we have nothing. So I don't think they get it. To others that are, well, we're fixing our legacy systems, and it's all about the system, and that's what their view of innovation is we're fixing our legacy systems so we can deal with analytics. But then there's those that are really focused on the culture and the idea that it's not just about technology, it's about ideas and how do you do things better no matter where it is, whether it's the analytical side and the data and the technology that you have, or the solutions to solving risk and providing different coverages, or how you produce and process those coverages and get to market. So it's really a cultural aspect, and we are seeing companies that are out there that really are pushing that have that aspect. We're seeing the other groups that are focused on, I'm going to invest in these organizations, and I'm going to look at what they have, and I'm going to pick the best out of what they have and bring that in-house, and that's going to help me be efficient. There's no right way to do this, but the point is trying to find a way to draw in new ideas and bring new ideas inside, and companies are using many different ways to do it.
Yeah. Actually, sometimes it's just a question of people realizing that they'll be able to make changes and act on ideas that quickly. It was interesting, the panel that just preceded us, they were just talking about this microservices and the ability to work on an idea separately from the rest of the system. And I thought, that's exactly what we need. So do you think that when an innovative mind sits down to do something with this great technology that we have and come up with a new idea, do you think they think about the human impact at the time, or is that something for the user of that idea to work through?
I've seen this vary dramatically between organizations and companies. I think the challenge with user-facing technology is the buyer may not be the user in your case. The person in your team who's writing the check is not the one who's going to be using it. And your sponsor, even the champion versus the admin versus the sponsor of that project, is very different. The sponsor cares probably about an MIS coming out of it, whereas the MIS will not show up if your user is not using it the right way, right? So I think it has to be, there has to be awareness for the fact that different people have different needs, and either not expect everything to come out of the solution, or be extremely clear whose problem the solution is being designed to solve, right? But if it's an end user, if it's something that you expect either your customers or your employees in the process of engaging with your customers to use, definitely the focus has to be on end user experience, and you'll have to figure out how to solve the rest.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions coming in here. Matt, you've got a specific question here about commercial lines. Do you think commercial lines is lagging behind personal lines on the innovation factor?
Well, I mean, I'd look at it in a couple different ways. When I look at it in terms of the companies and the culture, no, I don't think that there's any more, a slant in personal lines versus commercial lines in terms of the cultural aspects and what they're trying to do in the number of companies. When you look at it from an analytics perspective, I'd say no, I don't think that there's necessarily a lag behind. They're both commercial. A lot of the commercial lines carriers, particularly in the small commercial lines, there's a lot of analytics going into that, trying to almost bring small commercial lines into a personal lines type of environment, and work through that through analytics and AI type information to underwrite the business. The one area where I think there probably is some lagging is the process and the placement of the business. And it still is where the focus on personal lines is to faster, quicker, here's your quote to the individual and get it out there, because that's what individuals are looking for. Yeah. When you look at the commercial line side, there's still the aspect of a risk manager looking at perhaps a bigger, broader risk, and the idea that working through brokers, it is still more of a relationship aspect on the commercial side than it is on the personal side. I think there's more focus on that, speed and innovation in the delivery of the product.
So it's almost as if the lines between personal and commercial are blurring a bit, right? It's more about whether your risk is a standardized risk that other people have versus a unique risk for yourself. Yeah,
I really do. In terms of the analytics, it's really how standardized is it? So the smaller size commercial lines, you can get more standardized. That's more consistent with personal lines in terms of the analytics. Analytics-wise, all the way through the largest, I think they're still, they are just as innovative in what they're doing, but the delivery process is a different aspect for the large commercial lines.
Yeah. So we have, Yamini, maybe you want to take the question about how do we attract talent to the industry, although I would say
I think we kind of answered
perhaps we
that,
are
right?
pretty good, actually. I think I'm looking at the audience and at what I've seen today.
Yes, it seems like a great mix. But attracting millennials or tech-enabled talent, I think in an org, I mean, we try to do that, right? When we try to attract stronger talent in newer spaces of technology, probably it's important to create the culture of allowing them to fail a bit and allowing them to experiment a bit. I think what Matt brought up earlier in the discussion on build versus buy helps run that experimentation at a faster pace. You get great technology, you give them the flexibility to experiment on the inside, but also try a few things from outside to experiment faster, right? Because a build cycle takes a lot more time to experiment than trying to do it with third parties. So probably building a culture of allowing them to run a few experiments usually attracts very, very high quality talent, and empowering them to be able to do that and make very experienced and fact-based decisions on where they put the big budgets coming out of this experience is probably what would drive that.
Yep. No, I totally agree. And I've heard more than once today that people said that they didn't find insurance found them. And I think some of what you're saying is part of getting that out a little bit more.
Just to add on the whole issue of the millennials, and when you look at it, and it comes up time and time again, is the point you guys just made about insurance. People don't find insurance finds them. But the insurance industry still struggles with the aspect of what is the purpose and what are they trying to do. When you look at millennials, it's all about social good and helping people. I don't know of an industry that fits better into that than the insurance industry, and the insurance industry just has to continue to push that aspect to younger people so they understand what the insurance industry is trying to do, and the whole idea of closing the gap in terms of coverage and making sure that there's protection across all different areas. If you go outside the developed countries and you look at what's out there and the solutions that could be brought to bear by the insurance industry, there's so much possibility that when you're a millennial and you look at, well, I want to save the world. Well, the insurance industry is a real good place to start if you want to work in an industry that's really trying to help people. Look at it after any catastrophe out there. The insurance industry never has a reputational issue after a catastrophe. There's always some bad stories, but for the most part, the response of the insurance industry is always positively received. So that's the message they have to get out of. Look at the good that we do.
And that's a great point, because I actually was, even earlier in the day, someone just at our booth, this is an insurer who said, I'm putting my neck out there a bit, but someone said, we are not a insurer, we are a tech company, right? And they're probably extremely proud of what they're doing to build innovative stuff in-house, but you're not a tech company, you're an insurer, right? Because it's assumed that if you call yourself a cool tech company, you'll attract great talent, but in the tech space, probably in the innovation space, but it's not that these people are looking for the best tech company. If they did, we know what the obvious 10 choices would be, right? They're looking for a good reason to spend their, probably the best time of their, best years of their life on, committed to a cause, and that cause is probably the strongest, one of the strongest in this industry, right? It's a very meaningful industry which should exist, right? So, yeah.
Okay, so we just have a few minutes left, and so I think I'd like to give you guys both the same question and see what you think. When we've moved through this phase of transformation and we've gotten to the place we want to be, will there be more jobs for humans or less?
I can say that, I think I can safely say that probably innovation in the last decade, 5 years and 3 years has been the highest. I was just actually looking at the unemployment statistics ratio in the US, right? It seems to be at the lowest it's been in a few decades. So I think history and actual mega trends point to the fact that I don't think we are doing with less work or less jobs. There's a lot yet to be done. There are so many new opportunities, new markets, new avenues, new product lines which need to get out there. Some spaces, some markets, some lines are completely underpenetrated as markets, right? So definitely trends don't point to the fact that we are doing lesser jobs.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously when you think about that, it is a scary proposition no matter what industry you're in. Well, technology could take over, take jobs, and just wipe out entire job functions that are out there. But the evolution of what goes on, the different coverages that might need to come to take place. I heard somebody say in a panel I was on somewhere else, it talked about the fastest growing job going forward is going to be data cleaner. And you look at the Internet of Things and all the different databases and trying to get all that to work together. There's different aspects that are going to be needed. So I look at it as there will always be an evolution to find new things and solve new solutions in the insurance industry. So you'd expect there'd be changes to the jobs and would continue to develop. But looking in the crystal ball, it's scary across the board. It's not just the insurance industry, but there's a need for talent. And in the insurance industry in particular, I don't think there's going to be a major issue just because of the aging of the insurance industry. The insurance industry needs talent. It needs a lot of technical talent, and the data analytics side continues to grow. So over the next 10, 15 years, no, their innovation's not going to squeeze out the need for human talent.
Great. And for myself personally, I really enjoy the opportunity to do the best parts of our job and maybe offload the pieces that we don't like so much. So I think all in all, it's a good opportunity. So help me thank the panelists here for their time.